if you don't want other people to discipline your kids and discipline them more harshly than what you want them disciplined, then you need to do it first. You need to be the one that takes matters into your hands and say, hey, I've got this. I know they did the wrong thing, and I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen again. And, if we can catch our kids early, before other people and deal with it, then maybe they won't have to suffer the consequences, at another person's hand who doesn't love them and isn't disciplining them out of love to try to teach them. So that's one thing. Also, if we can discipline our kids early on when they're very young, then that helps them escape the harsher consequences of us, either us when they're older, or the law, or the harsher consequences that you just face whenever you're an adult. It's not the same as getting a smack on the hand when you touch something that you're not supposed to touch. When you're little, the consequences get greater and greater the older you get. And sometimes you suffer years and maybe even a lifetime for the things that you do whenever you become an adult. And so if we can discipline our kids early on in very small ways and teach them how to act, and that there are consequences for their actions when they're when they're young, then maybe we don't have to give them harsher consequences when they're older. But even if we do have to, whenever they are teenagers, better than making them suffer the consequences at the hand of another or at the hand of God whenever they are older. The harsh consequences that can last for a long period of time and hurt many, many people. That is our best bet. And so I want to read you a couple of verses about disciplining our kids early before we move on to a couple of other thoughts that I have over this lesson. And so Proverbs 19:18-21 says, discipline your son while there is still hope, and do not desire his death. Some of the other verses say destruction. If you will discipline them quickly, then they won't suffer the harsh consequences. So do it while there's still hope of redeeming them. A person of great anger will suffer the penalty, for if you rescue them, you will only have to do it again. Have you ever been in that situation? It's like you don't want them to suffer the consequences, so you rescue them from the consequences. But then when you do that, they don't see that there's any consequences to their behavior, and so then they do the thing again. And then you have to rescue them again, and then again, and then again, and then again. And so that's what this verse is saying, is like, don't rescue them from the consequences. If you do, then they're not going to learn their lesson, and you'll have to keep doing it. And then it says that we should listen to advice and accept discipline so that we may be wise the rest of our days. And so, that switches to us, but it shows you that if your children are taught by this discipline early on, then they will be wise whenever they get older, and it will help them for the rest of their life. It says, many plans are in the person's heart, but the advice of the Lord will stand. And that's a verse that is going to help us later when we talk about David. So we'll remember that one later, but it was in the same passage. And so I went ahead and read it now. And then Proverbs 29:15 says, the rod and rebuke will give wisdom, but a child left to himself will bring shame to his mother. That's what happened to Amnon. David left him to himself, and now he's brought shame to the whole family. It would have been shameful already to tell that he raped Tamar, but now the whole family is in disarray, and it's all because David didn't handle the situation himself. And then down in verse 17 of chapter 29 in Proverbs, it says, correct your son, and he will give you rest. Yes, he will give delight to your soul. And so, if you'll correct him, like I said early, then you can rest. Then you can rest easy knowing that he's a good person. He's not going to do anything absolutely horrible and suffer those kinds of consequences. And so you will be at peace. And so disciplining him early is what David should have done, disciplining himself so that he didn't have to be, justice didn't have to be served at the hand of Absalom in a much harsher way than it was by David.